Well, welcome to our photo show. Obviously I'm delighted that so many of you could make it and be up nice and early. We were hoping the weather was going to be with us, and fortunately it was. Fortunately it wasn't a cold day like yesterday. So welcome and thanks for being up early. Now, this morning we have Lisa. We're very pleased to have Lisa Saad here this morning, courtesy of Tamron Lenses. Lisa brings more than 30 years of photographic experience. Her work has gathered acclaim both in Australia and internationally, and she won the 2016 Australian Institute of Professional Photography Photographer of the Year.
Oh, thanks.
Lisa's website states, creative, distinctive photography. Her topic today is how to become a multi-award-winning photographer and create images that are timeless. By the time Lisa finishes her presentation, we'll all have a better understanding of how Lisa makes her photography creative and distinctive. Warm welcome for Lisa.
Hello. Thank you and good morning, and thank you to Michaels for holding such an amazing event, and also to Tamron. I'm part of the Tamron Pro team, for allowing me to be here and just to share a little bit of what I do. I thought I'd start with a video first. A lot of you may know my illustrative style, but you may not know that I also shoot advertising, commercial and corporate work, which is my everyday life. And so I've put together a video. It's sort of a little bit fast-paced and moving, but it just gives you an overall look at what I do, and then we'll go into the presentation. So here we go. So that was it. That's like my 31 years in a few seconds. Gosh, if it was only a minute's worth. Anyway, it took a long time, yeah. But as you can see, my style of photography is not just this dark, brooding, illustrative look. It's also quite happy, clean images that I shoot commercially as well. So I think as a photographer, being as flexible as possible in many genres or many styles is something that will allow you to be in the industry for a long time. I also believe that upskilling continually is very important, and that's why I started my journey on learning how to use Photoshop and how to use digital equipment, because I thought it was important. So, hello, that's my first slide. So I started my business when I was 19. I was second year at RMIT, and I met my accountant at a pub, and he was my accountant for about 28 years until I fired him a few years ago and got somebody else. But he helped me grow and learn about how to run a business, and which is very important. I also joined a networking group for a couple of years to further learn how to run a small business, which is also very important. As was mentioned, was the 2016 AIPP Professional Photographer of the Year, and these are the images in the folio, or the body of work, that won that accolade. I also won Victorian Photographer of the Year with the AIPP for 2 years, and the International Professional Photographer of the Year in New Zealand. So part of my scope, or what I do is I enter awards. I don't enter all awards, I enter a few awards every year, and I tend to rotate them through. And that challenges me, but it also, for me, it keeps my profile high, which is important at the moment. Okay, so this whole workshop, I'm going to take you through sort of a journey on how I produce my work. I'll try and get through everything. I will give this presentation to Michael's, and maybe you guys could, once you could see the video, maybe you could download this as well, just to get more information. And you are allowed to photograph the screen if you want to with your phones. So, for me, it starts with a concept. It starts with a good idea, with a concept. If you have an idea, try and draw this idea on paper and or write a story based on the idea. Every single image that I create, there is a story behind. Now, I don't always share the story, but at least I have a story that kind of grounds it. And it could just be a few lines, it could be a few words, it could just be colours, it could be feelings, anything like that, but as long as the image has a reason for its existence. Be impactful, be a storyteller, clever, playful, different, and professional. Images must look professional. Every image that I produce has a professional quality to it, and that's not because I've been doing this for a while, that's because I care enough about what I'm producing. So I make sure everything in the image works well. Include cookies, as I like to call them, that help keep the viewer entertained and engaged. If you have a beautiful image of a little girl and some flowers, always add an element that's going to give it an extra depth, or an extra little cookie that the viewer can look at longer. So it could be the background that you add, or it could be a little bee on the flower, or it could be something in her hair, or it could be the way she's looking at the camera or not. So there's always something extra in adding into the image. Elements that carry the story and add to the story, not detract. So try not to have distracting elements in your image, because the viewer or the person looking at the image won't resonate with it. They'll always go to the negative, and they'll always wonder why something's not there when it shouldn't be there. Does that make sense? Always choose your final destination. This is one of the most important things, because I'm a commercial photographer. Everything that I shoot ends up being published, and originally it was always published in a brochure or in a magazine or in a billboard. These days they get published to screen. So shoot to where it's going to end. Work backwards. If you're going to end up in a magazine, shoot to the magazine. Not all magazines have the same quality paper, so always kind of think about where your photo is going to end. If it's going to end up on screen, it's a different set of rules. So if it's going to end up on offset printing, to an inkjet print, or a billboard. So have a think about where you're going to end the image. Choose your image size, and that also then relates to the equipment that you're going to use. And in this day and age, you can hire anything. So if you are going to shoot for a billboard, think about shooting medium format or a high-end DSLR, but don't shoot it on sort of a micro 2/3 or your phone, because the quality is not going to be good. Does that kind of make sense? This is the process that I go through for everything that I do. And who's your audience? Find out who your audience is, if it's commissioned or not, and shoot to them as well. So we're just going to dissect this image here, which is an image I created last year. So if we look at impact, storytelling, clever, playful, different, cookie elements that carry the story. Of course, the image must look professional. Choose your paper stock. This was printed on Ilford cotton smooth rag. I got that wrong. And also the finished size ended up being approximately 20 centimetres by 20 centimetres. So the impact is the pull. That's the first thing that you see when you look at this image. The storytelling is the girl on the bike with the little dog following her. Be clever, playful, different. The tree with the bird going in the opposite direction. It's also a play on colour. We've got the green and the blue. Cookie elements that carry or add to the story. We've got the little pool ring in the pool, and then the dog, because the dog is actually off the ground, which means it looks like he's jumping. So this is how I've broken down this image. But if you look at every single one of my images, you'll see that I've made sure that these elements are contained within the image. It's almost like you have a small frame and you're trying to put as much as you can in there to make people enjoy that frame, so they don't see it and then walk away. They see it, sit with it, explore it and stay with it. Have a focal point, a lighting direction, a style, quality, that's most important as well, a narrative, an appropriate treatment for your image, balance and scale, mood, contrast, shadow, highlight and detail. All of these things are considered every time I make a photo, whether it's in camera or not. So planning and logistics. Light and lighting is important. Camera equipment, camera angles, your position, your point of view. Are you going to be the viewer looking at the image? Are you going to be in the image looking out? Are you going to be below looking up? Like, it all depends on how you want to interact with somebody. Are you going to just be a fly on the wall, or are you going to be able to allow the viewer to stand in your shoes and look into your photo through your camera? Scale of background versus midground versus foreground. I've seen a lot of images, whether they're shot in camera or not, have an incorrect scale of these three elements, and it really is a little bit discerning. If you're doing it on purpose, that's fine, but if it's not correct, a viewer or person looking at the image will think, oh, it's lovely, but they won't resonate with it. So there's a whole lot of sort of psychological elements that go into looking at a picture. Also, as humans, we love repetition. So we're drawn to repetition. So if you can add some repetition into your images, either a straight line vertical or a horizontal straight line, or a couple of straight lines like a window, or if you're looking out in the scene, you might have a silo. Anything that is repetitious or straight, either horizontal or vertical, people will resonate with. They'll automatically stand straight and look at the picture, and they won't turn their head. Does that make sense? Locations are important. If you want to shoot something whimsical, I wouldn't shoot them in a industrial space. I'd shoot them somewhere whimsical. So choose your locations carefully and choose your shooting style. Nothing wrong with Googling whimsically looking images and seeing what everyone else is doing to sort of get a vibe of what it is that you want to do and get yourself into the mood of it. So it's always good to do research. Elements, that's very important. Your main element, your supporting elements, and anything else that you want to add into the image. Timings, how long is it going to take you? I'm sure most of us have projects that have been going on for years and years and years and years. I have. But I realised that, well, they were a stepping stone to something else, so I've put them to bed, I've let them go, and I've moved on. If you keep holding on to something, unless you're going to do something with it, I would just let it go. Indoor versus outdoors, lighting conditions again, and also how much is it going to cost you? Is it worth you travelling to Scotland to photograph a certain building so it can be in a series? My answer to that is yes, because I do that all the time. But you know, it may not be viable for everyone. So think about the costs as well. And then we go into your imagination. How imaginative can you be? How creative can you be? Your craft skill and technique. Sky's the limit, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Your emotive response. What do you want the viewer to feel? How do you want to communicate? And in your enduring quality. People want to remember. You want people to remember. I do enter the awards and I get a lot of people saying, oh my God, I saw your photo, it was amazing. They will remember that, okay? And that's my thing, that's what I want. I want people to remember my images. Just a few other things. Main element, added elements, tone and colour, texture, straight, horizontals and verticals, composition, camera technique, time of day. Everything that I've just mentioned up to this point is what I consider before I make a photo, whether it's in camera or whether it's a composite, whether it's commissioned or not commissioned. There's a lot of thought process that goes into an image rather than me just going up and going snap. So let's break down this image. This is the original file straight out of camera. It's shot in Albany, New York, and it's the art centre there. It looks like a big sort of egg boat thing. So this is shot about 9 o'clock at night on it was around summer, and It's shot with a 1530, sorry, I always get those wrong. And it's, I'm standing underneath the object, or I call them objects, but the building, and I'm shooting the exact way that I want to see it at the end. So I'm using the line of the plinth at the bottom to create the drama. Okay? So my main element is the building. My added elements are the man, the elevator, and the city in the background. I've got tone and colour in there, which comes from the building. I've got texture, which is the building and the ground. My straight line, which is always in any image, is at the sort of where the road meets the city. That's my straight line, just to keep people centred. We have composition, camera technique and time of day. If I would have shot this building in midday sun, I would not have received this sort of look. So I chose later in the day, so the muted colours would come through and there was no contrast. Does that make sense? Because I knew that the end print needed to have as less contrast as possible. So that's the end result, that's before, and that's the end result. Okay? To me, this is a very simple composite, but a very simple image. There's not a lot going on. So, if we design and add story helpers, point of view, point of focus, colour and tone, straight verticals and horizontals, and push and pull. And what I mean by push and pull is that you have elements in the image that allow you to breathe and not breathe within an image. So either go into an image and come out of an image, or go left and right. So they're all the push and pulls. You might have a dark element and a light element. If we break down this image, so we've got point of view, which is the man on the bench. Point of focus, however, is the bench and the paper planes at the top. Colour and tone, we've got the blues going into the greys, so it's very muted, it's a very almost monochromatic colour palette, it's kept quite low. Straight verticals and horizontals, it's in the middle of the sphere and also the edge. And then the push and the pull is the top paper plane and the bottom paper plane. Okay? So they're all the different elements. And when you're actually looking at this image, you don't leave it. I'm keeping you in there. All the elements in there are allowing you to explore the image and stay within it. Now, whether or not you're interested in this subject, that's sort of subjective, and you might just look at it for a few seconds and then move on. But everything is in there for you to keep looking further. Now, selection. I tend to shoot a lot, and my husband thinks it's nuts, but I do it anyway. So it's all about what is going to be the best image that tells your story at that time. So these are two images of the same building. One has the lights and one doesn't. So these are straight out of camera. So I like the one on the left, whereas some people might like the one on the right, okay? So if you're going to choose an image, choose it because it tells the encompassing story, not because it's the one that is technically all right all the time, or the one that has the right lighting, but it's the one that is resonating with how you felt or how you want to feel when you look at the picture. Does that make sense? These are images from the Walt Disney building in LA, and it's the same sort of part of the building, but as you can see, I've photographed it a whole lot of different ways. Sometimes when I shoot, I explore what I'm shooting, or I like to be at the building for a long time or with the person. I've been known to go into photo shoots and talk to somebody for an hour and a half and then shoot them for 10 minutes and get everything I need. It's because I'm resonating with the subject. It's something that I am able to do. But once you have a connection, those people that you photograph will do anything for you. They will allow you to photograph them in any sort of way or mood, as long as it's, above board. Whereas when I'm shooting a building, I treat it the same way. I like to feel the building. I like to see its surroundings. I like to be with the building, if that makes sense. So I tend to shoot quite a lot of frames. Sometimes I'll shoot an area, go around the building, and then come back and shoot in the area. And I might shoot it the same, or I might shoot it different. And I don't know why I do that. It does drive my husband crazy. So processing, I process files, whether for a job or not, in these ways. I do it as neutral as possible. I always have a straight vertical or horizontal. I always make sure my highlights and shadows have detail. I always make sure the colour tone of the image, colour and tone, is succinct with the subject. So if it's a person, the skin is the right colour. If it's a product, the product is the right colour. So I always make sure that these things are happening. Cropping, do I need the whole image or not? Push and pull, make sure that either contrast is pushing or pulling or the subject is pushing or pulling. Now, that could be a sharp person in the foreground with an out of focus background. So the push and pull can be anywhere. And then we export. So this is in camera and then processed. So as you can see, there's made sure that the highlights are in, the shadows have detail. Probably can't see it on this projector. And then it's a clean image. So this is a clean image that I can use straight up in my folio, or I can use it as a base for a composite later on. So this is where we get to fun. So we're going to talk about compositing and also how I create the images. So what is each element doing and how are they impacting or assisting the next level above? So as you create an image in Photoshop, you have layers. And each layer works with the one above, okay, and also the one below. So if you have your background image at the back, at the bottom, or I sort of look at it as a 3D sort of sideways thing, then make sure that that element at the back, okay, is resonating with all the elements that come up the top. Do they distract? Is something in there that shouldn't be there? Do they push the idea or story forward and complete the viewer experience? Think of your image as a blockbuster film. Everything is contained in one frame. Are they necessary and are they adding or subtracting from the story? So this is just an example. We've got the original image on the left and then the composited image on the right. Okay? We're going to look at this image. I'm going to break it down for you and then show you some, hopefully 4 Photoshop techniques. So we've got our original image on the left, and then I've cleaned up, straightening the architectural lines. Right-hand side of the building near the door was straightened and slightly, and the ground was cleaned up. So I took off that yellow line out, and I've popped it back in later. I've added the main elements. So the one on the left is the image without adding mood. So when you're compositing, you're doing it in different layers. I tend to construct the image first, and then I'll add the mood, the colour and the tone later. And I'll show you how to add some mood as well. So adding main elements. So we've popped the city in, we've popped the elevator in, and we've popped the man in. But as you can see, there's no grounding, there's no shadow work, and there's no lighting work. So adding mood is the shadow, the light beams and the vignettes to control the viewer's eye, subtly move through the grandeur of the scale of the image. So once you've constructed your composite, you're not done. Then you've got to do all your blendings, and that's where you add your mood. So we've seen this before, original file and then retouching. So we're going to do masking, gradients and adding light. So I'll show you how to do a mask. A gradient, so to control your mood, and then adding light using light beams. So if you just bear with me while let's go into here. So the first thing we're going to do is masking, and I'm going to do a channel mask. Hopefully I can do it this way. I find sometimes that I can't. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the channels palette. Who knows how to do channel masking? So a few people? Okay, this is one of my favourite things. Now, in the channels palette, you have blue, green, red, and you'll see they're all grey, and then RGB. Okay? If I click on the blue layer, they're basically layers, you'll see that it has more contrast than the green, which has more contrast than the red. First thing you need to do is find the layer that has the most contrast. Much easier if the object's on white. If you have a lot of hair, this works really well. And then you're going to right click and then duplicate the channel. And then hit OK. Okay, that's the first thing you do. Find in the channels palette, find the channel that has the most contrast, and then duplicate it, and then select it. Don't forget to select it. Don't select the original. All right. Now we're going to bring up our levels, which is Command L, or you can find it under Image, and then we're going to make the image as contrasty as possible. Okay, hit OK. And then using your brush tool, which is B, we're going to paint in what we want to keep in black. This is quite difficult doing it on this angle, but anyway. And then what we don't want to keep is in white. Now, if you hit the backslash key on your keyboard, sorry, it doesn't work that way. If you click the original layer, sorry, I'm not in masking, and then we're just going to make sure that we have all the areas of the table. So see here how, I'll just zoom in. See here how it's all a little bit dodgy? So I'm going to hit B. I'm just using the square brackets to change the size of the brush. I'm going to paint that in. And then hit X to change it to white, and I'll remove that. Okay, so that's our table, pretty much. I've just turned on the blue, the original blue, to get the mask up. So what we've got is, we've got the channels palette, okay? We've got our blue copy. And what we're going to do is click the little round circle that's broken down with the marching ants, I call it. Hit that and you'll actually get the marching ants, okay? Now, if I click onto the original layer and then click onto mask, it'll remove the table, okay? Well, so we have to reverse that. So if you go into Select Inverse, click onto the Layers palette, onto what you would retouching, click onto the mask, it'll then remove the background. And that's a channel mask. It's as simple as that. Does everyone get that? Yeah. It's worth practicing. It's worth going through this over and over again. But it does help, especially if you want to composite somebody into a shot that, you know, they weren't there on the day, or you want to add a scene into, into a window if you're shooting interior, or whatever it is. But this is a very quick way and a very succinct way to create a mask. Of course, there are other ways to create masks, but I use this one quite a lot. Okay, so we'll just get rid of that. Go back to my presentation, wherever that is. There we go. So we're going to look at, so that was the first thing, was masking, okay? The next thing we're going to look at is creating moods with gradients and then adding lighting. So if I go back to Photoshop, which is here, all right, so this image we've had a look at and we've seen how it looks from beginning to end. So if I go down into here, that is my background, okay? It was shot somewhere near the Grand Canyon. I can't remember where because it was late at night, but that's my background. I've decided that that is the tone and the colour for the image, okay? The next image on top of that is Wellington. It's on soft light. I'll just bring this up back to normal so you can have a look. But that's the image of the city that's behind, okay? So once I change the blending mode to soft light, and then I've adjusted the opacity and it's at 69% here, that's going to determine, obviously, how deep or not deep the city is going to be in the background, okay? Very simple. So those two elements set the mood and set the tone, okay? The next thing that we're going to do is add the building. We've removed all the elements that we don't want. And the building, I don't sort of destruct the layer. What I do is I want this to be not so brown, because it's just because of the time of day, but also the building is actually brown. So once I've cleaned up the image, once I've done all the structural corrections, or I've cleaned things up, I create another layer, which is over here, and then I convert it into black and white, and then I change its opacity. And that's how I adjust the colour and tone of that particular element. Okay? The next thing we're going to add is the elevator doors, which is just basically an elevator that I photographed. The elevator surrounds. I'll zoom in so you can see that. So left door, right door, elevator, call button, which is a number 8 cue, ball, that's all I had. And then we've got the inside the elevator, okay, which is inside an elevator. Okay, and then we've got, let's turn that one on. We've got the man. Where is he? There he is, the man. Okay, which is my husband, which I photographed in the studio. Okay, so these are the elements of the image. I'm going to turn on the ground texture, which is just literally texture that I photographed. And then that is the picture. So let's add some mood. Okay, you can do this 2 ways. You can photograph an element and then add the mood. You can burn and dodge. What I'll show you is by adding we'll make a new layer, by adding a gradient, which is G on the keyboard, or it's here. Sometimes it's hidden by the paint tin, except it's not. Anyway, click on that, and we're going to use black to nothing. Okay? In order to make that black, click the top paint tin, that's 100%, and then the other paint tin is white, but it's at 0%. So black to nothing. We've got it on circular gradient up here. Oh, you can't see. How do I do that? There we go. Gradient. So black to nothing. And then linear, circular, polygonal or whatever, and mirror. So we're going to tick that one. Sorry about that, I didn't realise you couldn't see the top. All right, let's go back to full frame. So, start from the middle, drag to the corner. Did you see that? Did you see how it all of a sudden added mood? That's all it is. And we're going to stretch it. Because what I want is I want your eye to go to a certain spot, but I want the gradient to sort of encompass the supporting elements. So if I want your eye to go to the man, which is here, you can't see it. So I'm going to move the gradient so to make sure your eye goes to where I want it to go. Does that make sense? You can use all the transform tools so you can distort it. Okay, I hit return, and you can change its blending mode. Multiply will make it darker, so it'll make the highlights stand out more. Soft light will make it brighter, so it'll make the highlights not stand out as much. But if we use multiply and then we change its intensity, then I can control it just a little bit more. See that? So that's adding mood. One of the simplest ways to add mood. So if we turn on all the gradients, you'll see that I'll start to move your eye, but there's only 2 gradients on this image. So we've got a circular gradient here, and then we've got a gradient on the top here, this one, which I've actually twisted. Okay? Still can't see the man though. He's still kind of hidden. So what we're going to do, and you can either grab a sky and just take a triangle out of the sky and turn it into white, or if you don't have any skies and you're not entering any awards and they don't want photographic elements, what you can do is add a layer, draw a triangle. Okay, if you go edit fill and you fill it with white, hit OK. All right. And then to remove the marching ants around the edge, it's Command D. Go up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And what we're going to do is blur the edges of the triangle. So that's sharper, it's blurrier. Hit OK. Now change the opacity to soft light. And then use your transform tools. So once again, I'm going to turn it around. Where is it? Distort. And distort it. So it looks like a, let's have a beam of light coming out of the elevator. No, it's in the wrong spot, so it needs to come up. Oh, it's on soft light. Let's put it on normal. And then let's drop the opacity down. And let's blur it again. So filter, Gaussian blur, that's the last filter we use, so we just hit that again. It'll blur it again. See how it's just going to be blurrier? You can keep transforming this until you have it in the right spot. Okay. So that's adding light. Ta-da! So if we turn on the light that I've already created, so much fun. So there's light beams here. So this is exactly the same. I've just showed you. I'm just going to turn them on. So that's 4 light beams, 5 light beams, 6 light beams. That's a gradient up there. Okay. Put the yellow line back in. And then I have textures, which I'll talk about in a second. So that's pretty much how to create light and mood. The last thing is, what we want to do is add a shadow. Okay? So we have the man. I'll just turn off some of these because you can't really see. Because everything, in order to be grounded, see the little shadow there? We need to add a shadow so the man is grounded, and also it goes in the direction of the light. I've seen a lot of composites where all the shadows are all the wrong way, or and they wonder why we have, anyway. So if your main element is the man, and the shadow would obviously be behind him. So just copy it, so Command J. Okay, and it's going to go underneath him, so underneath the layer. And I'm going to flatten this layer. So we go layer, and so merge group, which is Command E, and that's going to flatten it. Okay, so now everything that was in that group is now one layer. If you right click on it, see how it says select pixels? Select those pixels and you'll get your marching ants. Okay, that's my copy. Okay, 5 minutes. So what we're going to do is go up to edit fill, fill him in black. Okay, and Command D to remove the ants, Command T to then flip him. See how it's now a shadow? And then distort. Change this blending mode to multiply. Change the opacity so it moves in. And of course you can feather. So filter, go back to blur, Gaussian blur. And that's too much. There we go. And that's your shadow. There are other things we can do with the shadow. How good is that? Have we all had our minds slightly blown? Sorry. All right. So that's the compositing part. I have 5 minutes, so sorry. Does anyone have any? Oh no, I can't do questions yet. All right, textures, just quickly. We have carpet, pebble mix, road base, rendering. These are my textures, okay? Everyday objects. Carpet, pebble mix, road base, as in country road, and rendering. The last one I did a job, and they just happened to have 50 different rendered walls, and I was like, this is just too good. And this was a sort of an area where they all some connected, so I took a picture. Gradients. Think about using out of focus skies. I usually photograph them with my 70 to 200, and it's sort of nature's gradient. They're already there, and they already give you the colour and the tone that you need. One last thing with your image. Your background is your establishing shot. It sets the scene. Your midground, the character or subject, it's the bulk of the story, it's the main subject. And your foreground is the close-up, it's the heart of the story, it's your anchor. Okay? Before I get kicked off, I'm going to play one more video, and then we're done. Sorry.
Thanks, Lisa. That was pretty amazing. Now, I said when Lisa started that we'll get most likely to get a better understanding of how Lisa makes her photography creative and distinctive. And I think we did, didn't we? Yeah. So thank you. That's fantastic.
Not a problem.
Now, we're going to have time. How we're going to work is going to have time for a couple of questions. Anyone got any questions? And then after those questions, we have to clear the room. So I'm going to go down with Lisa down to our lens section, because after all, she's being sponsored by Tamron, so down to our Tamron section. And you can ask her more questions. So, who's got the first question?
Oh, lady at the end.
Sorry, just wait for me so we can all hear.
I have to stand here because of the cameras. Can't. Apparently, if I go this way, I have no top.
How do you make your subjects and objects look less real? Like the bridges, you can't see the definition of the bricks, but they take on sort of not a cartoony effect, but they don't look like a bridge and a light pole. They have that. Is it texture or colours or tones?
I think it's the whole It's like a package. It's a package deal. I can't. It's everything. It's when I photograph the object, I don't necessarily change it once I've photographed it. I take it through a processing process and keep it very clean. And I also think that it's because I repair whatever it is that I'm photographing, so I remove all the weathering, or I make it very symmetrical or clean, and then when I bring it in, there's a lot of layers that goes through the image. But yeah, I tend to keep the elements. So I know I'm not answering the question. Sometimes I actually don't know, but it has to do with the way I've layered and textured and put the composite together. It's not one thing. Yeah.
Any more questions? Just.
With the Your Anonymous Man, do you have a whole series that you've shot in the studio that you just can pull? Because I appreciate that every image is part of the story that you've thought of from the beginning. Or do you then think, this is how I want you to be, and so then shoot it individually?
Yeah, so my poor husband, he's not in all of them, but he's in a lot of them. So there's an Anzac one, and I thought, I want to do an Anzac one, which I'd been sort of dreaming about and thinking about. So I went to Aussie Disposals and bought a very expensive suit, like an army suit. It was very expensive, and the slouch hat from the Australian Army, which is obviously not original. And then I dragged him into the studio, got him to put the suit on, and photographed him in the position that I wanted him in. Yeah, with the lighting as well. So each man is photographed individually for that particular photo.
And just very quickly, a second one, if I may. You spoke about entering select competitions and that you rotate through.
Yeah.
Do you provide the same portfolio to each? Because they're obviously a cohesive collection. So
So I sort of start off with a selection of images, and because you've got 2 years, and then I might enter one overseas 1 year, and then I'll move those images into a different overseas next year. So it's like a 12 sort of rotation of images. Very quickly, I do have a compositive workshop coming up. It's 2 days, and it's a step-by-step, which I actually take you step-by-step on how to create an image, and we print it at the end. And also I've got postcards, not for everyone, so sorry. I didn't think it would be so popular. This is fantastic. So if you want one at the back, put your hand up, and I'll save one for you, but otherwise come and grab one before you go.
Lisa will, in fact, bring them down to the counter
that's
downstairs.
What I'll do then.
Is that right?
Yeah, why not?
So, thank you again, Lisa.
Not a
That was
problem.
fantastic.